We are welcoming back Diamond and Leah Mariello, and they are of Oppenheimer Ranch Project. And Diamond has spoken for the Energy Fair a number of years now. But what they'll be discussing is changing your mindset with the current times. The discussion will include taking points of self-realization, need to garden, village, creating a food network, and nature, learning how to wild harvest. So what they'll be integrating is the intentions of what we have for Energy Fair this year. So please welcome Leah and Diamond Mariello.
Hello. Can everyone hear us good? Cool. Well, first I want to thank I believe this is like the 32nd annual Crestone Energy Fair. Isn't that amazing? 33. So a round of applause for all you that came out to the Energy Fair. Now the topic, the theme of the fair is reclaim self, village, and nature. And you know, some of the booths, some of the displays, all of the workshops, and all the speakers are here to speak about their particular expertise on each of those points. And so Lee and I, when we started the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, we didn't know a lot about food production. We didn't know a lot about food security. And we threw out our previous lives to just jump into a homesteading permaculture lifestyle. And in doing so, in the last 7 years or so, well, we've gleaned lots of excellent information that we're here to pass on to the public, because I don't know if you're all listening there, you know that the price of food has been going up quite rapidly, and especially in a small town like Crestone, the prices seem to go up even more than a big city. And so food security becomes a big problem. Now, in a rural area like this, a lot of people know about canning. They know about putting food up. It's something that their families have taught them. But the modern generation has grown away from the agrarian lifestyle. Back in 1900, over 90% of people that lived in North America knew how to provide and grow their own food. Up to 80% of food was grown by homes in 1900. And today, that number is embarrassing. Less than 2% of the country can provide 80% of their food. So today we want you all to rethink your sovereignty and reclaim it. And this about 45-minute discussion, we want to be interactive. So if you think that we're missing something, please raise your hand and speak up and come up, and we can get your point of view. And the whole point of changing your sovereignty is that it's very difficult. We've all been brainwashed to act the way we do. We all go shopping in the supermarkets we do. We have a system whereby you're in a rat race if you are younger and you have a paycheck where you can only buy a certain amount of things, and you continue to do this cycle of purchasing from stores and external sources. How many people out there have never gone to a store? See, that's the problem. And at the end, we're going to do a little test. And the test is, what if I said you can't go shopping for the next month? How long would you make it? And how long would it take for you to be surviving on nothing and thinking about maybe going into the woods hunting or fishing or wild harvesting? It wouldn't take that long. Most people don't have the type of nutrient-dense food located in their house to last a long period of time, because we work on new paradigms where the media has patterned us to go to the store to get what we need. And living in Crestone, you can only grow food, so, you know, different types of food in certain seasons, so therein lies the issue.
Additionally, if you are, storing food in your house for a future emergency, there's just no way that you can store everything that you need in your house. You just can't keep all of those supplies on hand. It's too much storage space. You're looking at keeping that storage for potentially the rest of your life. So I look at, when we do things like store food, I look at this as a way of buying time. So if something happens and it's SHTF, then we have time to figure out how we're going to get X, Y, or Z because we have a little stockpile. So we now try to focus on smaller stockpiles, and that will just get us through a period of time so that we have time to brainstorm and think about how we're going to provide for ourselves later.
So let's talk about the first talking point. That's the theme of the fair, and that's self. How do we reclaim ourself in the thought process of food security solutions? Well, every single person that came here and had the ability to come to this fair probably has the ability to grow food. You don't have to own land to grow food. You can grow food in plastic buckets and debris that you find at the secondhand store. Anything that will hold soil will grow food. And then you just need water, light, and seeds. And which is why we bring millions of seeds to the fair to give away to people so that we may inspire them to be more self-sufficient and learn how to garden. And on our channel, from the very beginning, the first thing I learned about permaculture and providing food for yourself is that you have to learn how to fail miserably. Because when you start farming, that's what happens. That's what happens to farmers. They fail. They don't go out there and make a successful harvest and collect all the money. Farmers fail, and they learn how to fail less. And that is what the whole purpose of farming is, to get into a position where you're doing less. So that's why we opted for permaculture. And we try to teach that to people, that based on design elements and the plants you're growing, you don't have to do so much after a period of time to have a huge abundance. So learning how to grow food is the first step in being food secure.
And you need that time as well to learn how to fail. It takes time to fail again and again and really learn what you're doing. And the other important part of that, especially with permaculture, is that you really get a chance to pay attention to your little plot of land and what it wants and the plants that are around it and how it can work with the crops that you're growing. So you got to build that time in.
And this kind of leads into village, how we bring in the community to help securing our food. Leah alluded to the fact that no one of us can keep all of the things we need to be abundant and vibrant. Let's say if the grid goes down. Not a single one of us has, 10 commercial greenhouses in our backyard that has a staff that's taking care of everything. But if you have a village and you're now all farming and you're using permaculture principles, some people's property are going to produce one thing better than the other. We produce a lot of Purple Mountain spinach. We produce a lot of cilantro. We do great numbers of potatoes and carrots, and onions do well on our property. But other people don't know how to grow food, and that's why they raise sheep or goats, and they milk them. So right there, we have joined two people together in a new type of system that's been going on forever called bartering. And if they're your neighbor and you have something to offer them and they have something to offer you, then you start more food security at the level of village.
Yeah, and that's another important piece. Let's say you were looking for a plot of land because you want to start growing your own food. I think it's really vital to look for land in a place where there are people that you can get along with who are also producing food. Ideally, they're producing food that's different than yours. I mean, I can't even explain what joy it gives me when I can trade my neighbor that has goat's milk for eggs. It's just such a lovely exchange in and of itself, but it's also wonderful that I don't have to produce my own milk right now, because we can't all do it all, and that's the point of Village and always has been. We are capable of being solitary, but we are community beings, and the food element speaks to that, because we can't all produce all of the things that we need.
But those that can produce the fresh whole foods, the high bricks foods, the permaculture foods that were grown without any pesticides, that were grown in the perfect environment with the right mycorrhiza, you can grow a perfect crop. I'm holding a native Anasazi pumpkin. It's one of the native squashes that kept all of the native cultures alive in the southwest part of the US right here. I harvested this last October. That's a year ago. And it hasn't rotted, and I didn't do anything special to it. It just grew in the perfect permaculture environment to create the high sugar content to allow this to not rot and to be food for a year without a refrigerator. Almost nobody on earth thinks that this is possible. Nobody is doing this because we buy food from the supermarket that has no bricks, no sugar content, grown in devoid soils that are slathered in pesticides. So if you simply put, how many people, raise your hand, just bought something, 3 days later you go look at it and it is a rotting mess. Yeah, it's getting worse. That never happened 30 years ago when I was a young man. And now anything I buy has been treated with a chemical or has been grown so improperly that it can't even store for a week, even in a refrigerator. So when you start to know how to grow using permaculture and the types of plants you're growing, I mean, listen to this. It's a fresh squash that I picked a year ago. That's pretty amazing. If you think it's amazing, please applaud.
And of course, as well, you know, anything that you're buying in the grocery store, even if it says that it's organic, some huge percentage, like what, 90% of that is contaminated with glyphosate, nonetheless, even though you're buying organic. And it's almost impossible to get away from that now, unless you grow your own food.
Yeah, which leads us into maybe the final topic, which is learning how to wild harvest and wildcraft. Because, and in the end here, we're going to do a little test and give you a test to go home and try out yourself. And everyone, unfortunately, will miserably fail the test. There's not a single person here, including us, that will make it through this test. But what it will do is it will open your eyes to how to repattern your thinking, to how to maybe refocus on your life on some more important aspects. Because the one thing that food security solutions do is they give you peace of mind. It doesn't make you look like a crazy person to grow squash that requires no refrigeration to store for a year. That makes you a very smart person, in my opinion. And it also gives you a hedge against what may be coming. And like the food we choose to grow in our limited spaces are very important. This is a crop I've showed before, and we've been land racing it in Pagosa Springs for a while. It's the most biodiverse native corn on earth that was developed by agro-scientists back in the 80s called Painted Mountain Corn. And they put all of the genetics, the best genetics of native corn, into this plant. So it's the most resilient to climate effects, to extreme weather shifts. The natives basically went extinct in the Southwest because of a major drought. But they still lived on in smart numbers because their corn was so diverse that it still grew. It grew in times of flooding, it grew in times of drought. It grew when it got cold, and it grew when it got hot. And so this corn has the genetics to express in all of those conditions. So you don't have to have a bunch of varieties, you just need the right seed that knows if it's cold, it'll grow differently than when it's hot. And this Painted Mountain Corn is so amazing that if you pollinate it correctly and plant it correctly, it's drought tolerant. It has a sweet phase where you can harvest it and eat it fresh. Then it has the dent phase where it can store indefinitely for use later. The original seed we got to grow this was over 14 years old, and we had 100% germination. And that's because of the genetics, not because we were master gardeners.
One of the beauties too is that we can all do this with a lot of the plants that will grow here. If you keep planting that seed again and again, that plant will acclimate to this climate, and then you have something that can really tolerate the extreme conditions of a place like this.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about simple things you can do. I just spoke to someone. So once you're growing your own food, it's hard to know how to can it, and it takes all this boiling and input into it. None of that needs to happen. For long-term fresh food storage, you just need to learn how to feed your gut. And with a small amount of salt and fresh, clean water, you can lacto-ferment anything. And you simply add typically 1 tablespoon of sea salt to 1 quart of water, and you can put anything in there and put it in a refrigerator, and in 3 weeks you will have a lacto-fermented or lacto-pickled vegetable. You can put in squash, you can put in high-acid foods. You can lacto-ferment almost anything, and it's so simple. It doesn't require any skill except maybe I mean, I don't know how much skill it takes to put a tablespoon in a quart of water. And then the food becomes more nutritious because it's feeding gut bacteria, which is going to make you a healthier human. And it's going to affect your entire body. Your gut bacteria affects your whole body. And the reason a lot of people get sick is because they're not eating the correct things. And one of the ways to reset your body and your immune system is to bring in this lactobacillus bacteria. This is one of the bacteria we need to reset our immune system. And you can all start doing it simply by lacto-fermenting your cucumbers, the squash is amazing. Summer squash, lacto-fermented. And it lasts for months. It can last for over a year. Like stuff we pickled 2 years ago is still in one of our fridges. It's amazing how simple that is. And then we have chickens, so we have lots of eggs. And there's ways to preserve eggs for long periods of time for your community's well-being, and your families.
Yeah, I do think that food preservation is extremely important. Obviously, fermentation is an option. With eggs, you can do things like you can do water glassing. So this involves putting eggs in a bucket of water with either calcium carbonate or sodium silicate, and that can last you up to, I think, a year. And that's also a great way, just even in a regular year, if you have chickens that don't lay during the winter, ours do, but many breeds do not. That's a great way to make sure that you have fresh eggs in the wintertime, and they taste absolutely fine. They're completely fresh. And you just put that bucket in a cold, cool, dark place, and you're good to go. But also doing things like root cellaring, building a root cellar somewhere and putting it actually in a secret location where maybe the only people who know about that are the people who are sort of in your inner circle of, your village food people. Because I don't know, in a let's say an off-grid situation where you've got lots of people who do not have a store to go to get food, they're not prepared. Well, guess where they're going to come? They're going to come to you if they know that you have food. So extremely important to have a backup supply that is secret that people can't find. And a root cellar is actually a pretty great way to do that. If you can find a way to hide your entrance, that's a great way to do it.
I think the better way to do it is have a big enough community where everyone's involved in your food security. And this is creating a village. Now, a few things will be necessary in a case where, let's say, food won't be coming for a year. Can anyone imagine that may be possible in their future? Deliveries will stop. So yeah, there's some people out there. You need to consider the entire village. And small homestead butchery is very important. You need a local butcher because even if not everyone eats meat, using animals like pigs can give you an amazing product like lard, which can give you a whole plethora of products that you're going to need in general life, like soap and other things. And you can also render these fats for use as survival foods, as cooking aids, as heating oils, and they have indefinite shelf lives. And everyone knew this in the late 1800s. This is the unfortunate thing. This is not taught in schools. You have to buy a book. If you start doing it and tell your neighbor about it, he's going to think you're a maniac and a lunatic. It's like, this guy wants to learn how to make soap out of pig fat. Why doesn't he just go to the dollar store?
And it's still worthwhile. Let's say you're not a meat eater. Well, it's still going to be worth your while, perhaps, to make something like pemmican, which can store indefinitely, and then you can use that to trade with people for things that you do need.
Yeah, we're in one of the unique environments. There are studies that just came out, and the best are coming from Michigan, where they were testing the wild populations of deer. And just 5 years ago, they found 62% of the deer kidneys contained glyphosate and other toxic materials. And then a study that just came out this year found 98% of the deer had those chemicals in the kidney. Now, I wouldn't eat a deer in Michigan, but I would still eat an elk in Pagosa Springs because we don't have those high levels. So this is a unique area where we can be utilizing this type of wild harvesting to our advantage. We have some of the most pristine waterways. We live on the only federally protected waterway in the United States. It was our community where we live on the Lower Blanco River sued the federal government because they stole 90% of the water and gave it to New Mexico. And then the federal government lost. And they had to come in and restore the river to 1/10 the scale to bring the fishery back into health. And so there's no more oil drilling where we are. There's a lot of places here that have pristine water, especially Crestone, where the water is coming directly out of the mountain. There's not a lot of places left on Earth like this. And the amount of natural resources we have here are very underutilized. Well, some people in Crestone are picking up what we're putting down. I think Peter Mayer, who was ever just up here, who's doing work with the Pinyon Forest. There are amazing people doing amazing work, and it's growing. The information we're sharing is growing because it's not coming on CNN. It's certainly not coming from the mainstream media. You're not going to read it in the newspaper, because they're controlled by multinational corporations that don't want you to be sovereign. They don't want you to be free. They're shutting down farmers that don't follow their rules, that do things in the old ways. They just destroyed an Amish farmer in Bird in Hand, PA, where I'm from, nearby, where I grew up, because he was selling, because they don't use electricity. That's why they got attacked. They can do everything with a horse and buggy. And the government doesn't like that. You know, they're not getting any subsidies off the 800 cattle they're selling directly from the grass field to the consumer, which is how it should be. So you know where your meat comes from. So you know it didn't sit in a shipping container for 14 weeks and came from some radioactive field in China, which is where most of the beef comes from.
That right there is the entire reason why we started the Oppenheimer Ranch project to begin with. Many of you may already know that Diamond started the first March Against Monsanto in Philadelphia, and we are holla, and it was a big deal. I joined him in the third year, and we had a massive turnout. It was amazing. But we're trying to control our food. We want to know exactly what's in it. We want to be able to produce food that has the fewest pesticides possible, and of course, we don't use any at all. Also having control of your water is hugely important, as Diamond alluded to. Let's say you're still in the process of figuring out how to do this. If you're looking at buying land, make sure that water is your first consideration. I'll just give you an example. In Pagosa, a lot of the drilled wells have sulfur in them because we have the Mancos Shale over there. And that sulfur it stinks. Sometimes you can light your water on fire, and it is extraordinarily expensive to treat, not to mention not sustainable in the long run. So we made a point of buying land in river valleys where we can put in culvert wells, which are shallow groundwater wells that don't get that sulfur. So having that consideration is hugely important, because you don't want to be in a pickle where you have to get your water trucked in or get it from somewhere else to be perfectly clean. But there's so much effort to take that sovereignty that you have to control what you're putting in your body away from you, because there's money in it for giant corporations. So it really doesn't pay to allow little folks like us to provide their own food.
Yeah, and some damaging and very damning evidence coming from peer-reviewed studies. There was some information that was gleaned a few years ago that some forever chemicals were showing up in rain.
PFAS.
But a new study that came out this year showed that 100% of all rain on planet Earth contain forever chemicals in the form of PFAS. And this comes from the plastics industry. These are endocrine disruptors. These are chemicals that never go away, chemicals that Monsanto created, PCBs. These are chemicals that will never be removed from our environment, that are carcinogenic, that bioaccumulate in fish, in fats of animals. And so simple water collection from rain is a dangerous activity now if you're not properly filtering the water. But if you just let it go through the sand and the soil, a lot of that PFAS comes out. So that's why it's more practical to have a well than to be catching water from the sky. And a lot of people are just catching water from a gutter and using it. And that is scientifically not very good these days. So you need to run that through secondary systems. Even if it's just simple sand and activated charcoal, you're going to take the majority of that out. So please don't drink the rainwater.
That also brings up to mind another skill that would be very useful to have, which is to know how to actually filter your water properly with, material other than commercial filters that you're buying somewhere. Because not every chemical is going to get captured by every commercial filter. But like Diamond said, if you're filtering through sand and charcoal, you can capture the majority of that. And you may not have those commercial filters available to you in the future.
Yeah, and you can always distill your water. You can always spend tons of money and get a big Berkey and have thousands of those filters on hand for the rest of your life and drink pond scum. That is also an option. But a lot of people don't have that type of people don't even have $2 to buy a donut, for goodness sakes. But if you live near sand and you can burn wood, you can do just as good a job. So there are workarounds from this, but you have to change the way you think and live, because these aren't ways that we normally think and live. But I'll tell you what, and this is how I really want to wrap this up, and this is called the test, the food security test. First of all, how many people at any scale, even if you have a cup on your windowsill with an herb in it, how many people try to grow something that they eat? Should be almost, yeah, I think it should be almost everyone. And it needs to be everyone in the future. The second thing is, what if all of a sudden there was a solar flash from the sun and the computers and everything fried, and even maybe 3 months till something worked, but a year? How long until you would be uncomfortable? Would it be a day? Would it be a week? Would you keep staring into your phone hoping it worked? I mean, what's the reality? And that's the test. You could test yourself and you could just say, honey, let's try not to go to the store till middle of September.
Oh, but it's more than that. I mean, you don't have any electricity. You got to start with thinking about the fact that in most cases, water gets pumped with electricity. So if you don't have electricity and a backup source, maybe a solar source, you're not getting your water.
Yeah,
so
and the water in the back of your toilet doesn't taste good, and it only lasts so long. There's only a few gallons. Yeah, so that's what happens when the power goes out. People die. 80% of populations in cities will die because they will not know how to get rid of their excrement, and then disease rapidly spreads. So that's part of food security solutions. If you're in a major city, you need to get out immediately. So you need to have a bug out plan to a place where they are food secure. So you need to make friends with people in Crestone, or have land somewhere else, or just have the wherewithal to drive out into the rural area, because you'll be literally eaten alive or be consumed from the bad water.
And if you're not in a big city, do think about what is near you. Is there a big city near you? Is there a large town near you where you suspect people are not prepared? Because they are going to come knocking on your door. And people do all kinds of stuff when they're hungry. So all of that is consideration. How are you going to handle that situation? And this is outside of this talk, but that's more of a security issue. But it is also the food security piece is, where are you storing your backup food where no one knows about?
And one of the great ways you can get started is taking a wild harvesting class. I know there was a great talk on wild herbs and medicine here. I don't know if it happened already or it's going to happen. But it happened this morning, and you all missed it. But you can get a book on wild harvesting. It's important to go into the woods with a knowledgeable person that knows how to wild harvest. We had great clubs in Philadelphia where we wild harvested in Fairmount Park, right in Center City, Philadelphia. You have to know how to wild harvest. You don't harvest near roads where there's going to be leachates from cars and fumes and things like that. You want to be far into the woods. You don't want to be harvesting where they spray any chemicals. You have to know, if you're in a farm, you have to know what they're putting on the ground. But what you can do by going into nature is a few things. You can heal your soul simply by being present in nature in any sense. It has a Japanese term called Shinrin-yoku. And certain forests have different pheromones. These are literally plant products that come out of the plants that our body consumes as we're walking through the environment, that can heal us, that help our immune system. That's why people that get closed in a box and don't see the sun get sick, because they're not exposed to these things. So you can literally be healing yourself in the forest by being there, while learning about what's edible there, maybe while carrying a book on how to ethically wild harvest. Like, ethically, we all know what that means. That means don't take it all, you prick, right? You take 5%. You try not to harm the earth as you're doing it. And there's ways to give back as you're wild harvesting. And hunting and fishing. We live in an area where there is so many resources for good food products and proteins. They give away, if you don't want to harm a fish, they give away salmon at multiple locations in Colorado in October for free. Does everyone know that?
And that's salmon that's going to die anyway.
Yeah, it's coming up the river to die. So they harvest it and they give it to the public for free. This is a great way to get into learning how to smoke fish. More food security solutions. And even if you don't eat fish, I guarantee someone you come in contact with wants that smoked fish. Because smoked fish is so banging. It is.
Indeed it
Especially local smoked trout. Or free smoked salmon. So get to learn your local environment. Get to learn how to wild harvest. Am I leaving anything out?
Well, I was just going to say on the wild harvesting front, do make sure you get that book or that person that really knows a lot about wild harvesting. You don't want to start eating plants that you shouldn't be eating. We have a friend who did this and almost killed himself, so bear that in mind.
Yeah, don't eat the skunk cabbage.
Don't eat the skunk cabbage.
And even if you are a pacifist, consider the fact that if something does happen, do you want people coming to your house and taking advantage of you and your family? And for most people, that's no. So it's probably a very good consideration to learn how to protect your family. And that might mean learning how to shoot a weapon or buying a weapon and learning how to use it. You don't buy a weapon and not learn how to use it. That's number one rule of buying a weapon. The second rule is you don't point it at anyone you don't want to kill. So if you're a pacifist, the only reason you would use a weapon is to protect yourself from being killed. And I don't think that's a bad thing, and it's something you should consider. Also, if you live in Colorado, grow weed.
Grow lots and
You're
lots
all
of
allowed
weed.
to grow it, even if you're against it. This is a commodity that with very little skill, you can grow thousands of dollars of legally and keep in your basement until your pothead neighbor who needs something, or maybe you need something, or maybe your electrician runs on marijuana. It's a lot cheaper than your weekly salary.
And it will also help keep your immune system in good shape.
Yeah, you can eat raw cannabis. It's the healthiest food on the planet. It's the most nutrient-dense food that's medicinal at the same time. Eat raw female flowers now. Do you think we left anything out? Anybody else have something that we left out that we should discuss? Oh, if you go to the Department of, I don't know, DEP or whoever gives out the fishing licenses, there's a free booklet you can get from anywhere that gives fishing licenses, like Walmart or a sporting store that sells fishing licenses, that has all the locations and dates of these places. Vallecito Lake is a place that's right before Durango. There's a couple places near Durango. There's a couple places in New Mexico. Anywhere that there's a reservoir that the kokanee salmon run in, they have a giveaway. It's typically between the first week of October and Christmas. And some areas have multiple weekends. Most local newspapers in the area will publish it, but if you're an hour away, it won't be in your paper. So you got to be in the know. But you can call your local DEP and get that information for the free salmon. 20 pounds per cooler, and it's usually worth the drive.
What else did we leave out? What else do you want to know?
Michael. Yeah, you can keep bees. Bees aren't hard to keep. There's very high impact beekeeping and low impact beekeeping. If you look at some of the beekeepers in Eastern Russia or the Baltic states, they have a practice of doing nothing. They get the bees, they put them in the hive, they put it in the woods, and they don't go back until they want the honey. And then that's it. And that's the kind of beekeeping we do. We grow the hive. I don't ever go in and see where the queen is and put a paint on her head. I just keep the hive happy, and they provide us with unlimited honey. And they also help grow the biodiversity in your area. So if you're doing a permaculture farm and you have conventional gardening and you're growing squash and things, you need the bees. You're going to find that bees don't like the food that you're growing, though. An average beekeeper knows that bees eat native plants. So our bees are on the yellow clover, the white clover, and the rabbit bush. They don't care about squash. 2 or 3 of them are dumb enough to go on our squash and make squash. The rest of them are bringing in the flavor of the land that we're on. So if you buy some of our comb honey, it has all the propolis and all the flavor and everything that they put in the honey because we're not filtering it. And another thing about honey is stop buying honey from a non-natural beekeeper.
It's not real honey.
No, it's all treated with oxalic acid. And even everything that's sold in a supermarket has to be treated with oxalic acid. This is a toxic chemical. You do not want to eat that honey.
It's also in skunk cabbage. So again, don't eat the skunk cabbage.
Yeah, so get yourself some bees. They're not hard to raise. They just take I would say a few days a year of time. And in that time period, I can create, if I was selling it, which I'm not, well, how much are we selling? We sell about $1,000 worth of our honey. We give it away to people. It's a great way to have all of your Christmas presents taken care for, is your honey. But if you're eating this honey with propolis, that's another cog in the medicinal basket. I haven't been to a doctor since I changed my diet and started eating the way I do. And I haven't been sick or incapacitated either. And that's going on 14 years.
Also about pollinators, of course you can, if you want to bring in butterflies, you can certainly plant flowers that will attract them and other pollinators. There's lots of options there, and you can look all of that up. We've got 2 questions here.
Yeah, well,
electric fence.
Yeah, you have to have a system.
You have to do it.
If you're in a high bear area, you can put up like a cyclone enclosure that's full enclosure. But some angry bears can move those, so they have to be well staked. You really want to electrocute the bear, and it's a humane way to never have them come back. You set up a type of electric fence that has chicken wire on the exterior of the perimeter connected to the ground. So the bear is standing on the chicken wire when he touches the single wire. You light the bear up like never before, and they will never, ever, ever come back to your hive.
You won't kill them, but you will really deter them. And I will tell you, we have personal experience with this. We did have a mama bear and cubs get into one of our hives, and it took a few tries to get the electric right to stop them from coming back.
Yeah, so we had 3-wire electric with like 18-mile fence on a single enclosure that's tiny. And it didn't work until the bear accidentally broke into the chicken house, came out of the chicken house across the chicken wire fence, and touched the wire then. And the bear was never seen again. So you really want to get a maximum charge into a bear. The only other way, and the DP have been out, if you have a bear issue, they come out, they'll give you free non-lethal rounds. They'll explain to you they'll even give you grant money to put in your own electric fence system. So utilize all of the government money, because if you can, especially the free non-lethal rounds, they may save your life. But shooting a bear will not prevent it from coming back. It just pisses them off. If you just shoot them with a beanbag, by not being present and them touching that electric fence set up the way we said, that's really the way to go. Never had a problem since.
Another question here? Any other questions?
We've never had a problem with mites in this area. Where are you from? Oh. Well, the varroa mites are going to only be coming from the apiary that you're purchasing from. So where did you get your bees? Yeah, so the only way you can incorporate a varroa mite is if another beekeeper here had bought bees from California. So all the bees that are coming in are coming from a different state. They come in these tractor trailers and they get sold in Colorado Springs or wherever, and they bring the mite in here. So if you're in an area where there's other beekeepers, there's no way you can control that. There are some natural methods to control varroa mite that you can go look into, but it's quite expensive. So therein lies the problem of beekeeping. What she just said right there is once you have an issue, like we've lost our entire apiary at least once. But once you're a keen beekeeper, you know what to do in May. Does everyone know what happens in May? It's swarm season. That means free bees. So how many people have had a swarm in their yard on a tree? I mean, we've had like 8. Only a few people? So when bees are in that state, they're completely calm surrounding the queen. You just need to cut the tree off, shake them into a box, and you have a beehive. You won't get stung. They're not worried about stinging you. They're worried about protecting the queen when they're all up on that tree. So it's one of the safest things you can do is to steal a honeybee colony that's up in a tree. So if you don't know that, now you know. But we always recommend a bee suit, just in case that one bee didn't get the memo. Yes, sir.
Down that way.
Straight by the entrance. Go
Oppenheimer Ranch Project. We're
straight
not hard
out
to find.
on the right. So any other questions? We'd be happy to answer them at the booth. Go ahead, one more. In 5 years, we'll be totally off-grid.
Yes, most definitely. We're not fully off-grid yet. We're getting there. You know, we're doing about 600 things all at once, so it takes time. You know, we're still building. And for us, the off-grid piece, and this is surely the case here as well, good to notice, if you're building, wait until you get your occupancy permit before you put your solar up. Yes. Because things get way more complicated with county governments if you want to do your solar system first. So we have all of our solar gear, but it is just sitting there for the time being until we're actually done building and we have occupancy, and then we add it later. Yeah, and don't grid tie. Do not grid tie. Because with grid tie, and if you don't know, grid tying is when you can use both the county or whatever it is, the county electric, as well as your solar, and switch between them. The problem is that with you, when you do a grid tie, you're agreeing that you will not use your solar when the grid goes down. So it's completely pointless for you. Additionally, the electric companies, they'll charge you a fee. They will pay you for your electric, but they will also charge you a fee, which makes it not profitable at all.
They charge you a monthly fee so that they can steal your electric and sell it to others. That's insane.
With a terrible return to you.
You know? Stop giving the corporations the money that they're stealing from you and take back your sovereignty. If you go off grid, you need a battery bank. If the battery bank fails after the grid fails, then your solar only works during the day and you go to bed early. I mean, this is not rocket science.
But more, and you know, in 5 years, you know, not only do we want to be off grid, but we would like to be producing all of our own food, or in the sense of, you know, maybe some of that is our food that we trade with a neighbor for something else that we need. You know, we still do go to the supermarket. We would survive if we didn't have one, but we would like to, you know, just be producing more.
Yeah, we want to go
as self-sufficient as possible.
Off system. So I don't need a vehicle. I don't need to go to the gas station. I hop on my horse and I go 3 miles to Rick's, because he knows how to bake pies, and I need some pies or something. So when I'm going shopping in the future, it's not going to be at the supermarket. It's not going to be going to town. It's going to be going to some other farm or a person's house on maybe my flying electric hoverboard that's rechargeable solar, obviously, or my horse. And so that's a couple years out. But like oftentimes, and it's happened now, we're 7 years in, we'll be eating dinner, and I'll have to remind her, I'll be like, this is a 100. So
everything we're eating is from our own farm. And you go, wow. And that happens. It just feels amazing. I can't even explain to you how wonderful it is. Like, I eat vegetables every morning with my breakfast. And when I just go out and pick vegetables, and it's like I'm going to be eating that later today, man, that just feels amazing.
Yeah, so we want to thank the Crestone Energy Fair for inviting us again.
Yeah, thank you, Crestone.
And all you heroes for coming out and supporting the fair, because if you guys aren't here, there's no reason for us to be here. And then we can't share this information. So keep coming back, support the work Crestone does, and we love you.
And we love Crestone.